From the East Texas Sports Network studios, powered by Texas Dairy Queen, a tradition of excellence, the ETSN podcast, where Clint Buckley and Mike Graham offer their, well, they just talk. It's the lowdown on everything high school football in East Texas. And now, Clint Buckley and Mike Graham.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 3 edition of the ETSN.fm podcast. We've got a ton to talk about today. I'm Clint Buckley, and I'm joined, as always, by Mike Graham. It's good to see you made it back from Arkansas.
Yeah, that was a long trip, and I'm back and about to head out of state again, just like you. I'm excited to dive into everything in Week 3, but I think the best place to start this podcast is just recapping the Lufkin-Tyler Lee game, because that was one for the ages.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a lot of fun this week, but before we start to talk about anything that's going on Friday and Saturday, we got to go back to the epic comeback that Lufkin had last Friday night against Tyler Lee. 39 points down in the first half. They were down 42-3 with about a little less than 2 minutes to play in the first half. They get a touchdown before halftime, and then, wow. I mean, they score touchdowns, I believe, on their first 3 drives. They get a field goal, they score another touchdown, they tie it up late, they go to overtime, they kick a field goal on their first possession, and they stop Lee on downs on their possession in overtime. So, incredible game, and to top it all off, it was Coach Quick's birthday.
Yeah, I saw that, and I saw that the game also got profiled nationally by Huddle, that they made a highlight video of the entire game, all the scores and stuff like that, and you got to see Lufkin really bang up that Tyler Lee defense in the second half, and just another tough game for the Red Raiders. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back this week against John Tyler.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say one more thing about the Lufkin game is, I mean, it was literally like the two teams exchanged uniforms at halftime. I mean, it was crazy. Lee had put up almost 530 yards of offense in the first half. In the first half, Zach Hall had over 400 by himself, the quarterback. And, the second half, Lee is held to, I think, 175 yards in the second half, and they only score 7 points. Huge credit to Lufkin's defense. And I talked to Todd Quick, the head coach, about it afterwards, and he said they just went back to the basics. They went with 1 defensive front and 2 defensive calls. And Lee never really adjusted to that defensive approach in the second half. They just kind of tried to stick with what worked for him in the first half, and Lufkin was able to make the right adjustment at halftime and shore things up, because if the defense doesn't get better, that comeback doesn't happen.
Yeah, no doubt.
So congrats to Lufkin. I know it was a tough Week 1 loss to Longview. They lose by a point on a block extra point attempt at the end of the game. So congratulations to Lufkin. We'll see if that'll carry over any positive momentum to this weekend. But you mentioned Lee. And wow, I mean, it's our game of the week. It's Tyler Lee against John Tyler, 2 crosstown rivals, and for the first time in a while, it seems like both teams are really desperate for a win. They come in both at 0-2.
Yeah, I think this is the first time since 2011, and in that season, Tyler Lee won, but they went 1-9. John Tyler turned around and went to the state semifinals. So definitely not time to hit the panic button if you're part of either of those two fan bases, but you need to see some positive improvement on a specific side of the ball this week. And John Tyler's defense is adequate, and Tyler Lee's offense is pretty fantastic, especially in the first half of games. For whatever reason, there's a little bit of lull in the second half, but really I think this game comes down to John Tyler's offense versus Tyler Lee's defense. Both sides have some things to correct, and they're going to be able to go against another side figuring out things. And I think that the winning side is going to have a lot more confidence heading into their district seasons.
That's an interesting point you make, and I agree with you. Through the first 2 weeks, it's been clear that those two teams have had a struggle on one particular area of the ball. And for John Tyler, it's been offense. You were able to see them last week against Longview, and for Lee, it's been the same as it's been for the last few seasons, and that's defense. They have a really tough time stopping teams from getting into the end zone. So John Tyler may look at this as an advantage to get healthy on offense, so to speak. To try to get some positive momentum begun before district. Both of these teams begin district play after this, so this is kind of the final non-district tune-up before the real season begins in district. So it ought to be a lot of fun for sure. Another big one this week, Lyndale and Van. These are 2 rivals, and for the first time in a while, Lyndale maybe coming into this thing as the favorite.
Yeah, Lyndale looks good, and they've won their past 2 trips to Van Memorial Stadium. I think that I would favor Van in this game because of Alfonso Thomas, and they've got 2 quarterbacks that are running, and they can throw the ball when they need to. They've been very productive on offense so far. But if Lyndale can take away Alfonso Thomas and the quarterback's running ability, those quarterbacks are still new and still figuring out their chemistry with new receivers, and everything can kind of become complicated if you can load the box and convince Van that their best route in the game is to throw the ball. So I think that's where Lyndale has an advantage, and I think they have to be feeling pretty good about themselves after the shutout win against Chapel Hill and then a tight contest against a Carthage team that we think is a whole lot better than they were last year.
And think about this: if Lyndale is able to get the W on Friday against Van, just think about the competition they will have played in non-district. Chapel Hill, of course, they've had their struggles, but we figured they'll figure all some of that out before the season's over. And then Carthage last week, and then Van this week. 3 of the best 4A programs in the area, and if they're able to go 2-1 and kind of get a feather in their hat before that rough district play starts in a couple of weeks. This could be a big game for Lyndale, and they can maybe use that as a springboard into the district season.
Yeah, I think that this game's pretty important for them. They'll be on an open week next week, and then they begin district play against Corsicana, and I think that winning this rivalry game will either inflate their confidence tenfold, or it's going to hurt them a lot. You saw last year that Van kind of blew them out, and then
it had a negative effect.
It really did. They were kind of sulking after that, and they went into that Corsicana game, lost by a point. Then they ran into a dominant John Tyler team the next week and lost. That started a skid that they weren't able to snap until, I believe, the White House game.
Right, at the very end of the season at overtime, I think. And I think, if you want to point to something last season that's maybe helping them this year, it's the way Lyndale finished last year. I mean, White House technically had very slim playoff hopes, still alive. They had lost the week before to Nacogdoches, which pretty much, for all intents and purposes, knocked them out of playoff contention. But there was still, a tiny sliver of hope that White House was carrying into that final game of the season. And Lyndale was able to go down to White House and defeat them in overtime. And I'm wondering if some of that positive momentum built up and carried into the offseason is now carried into the start of the regular season.
I think it has. When we talked to Coach Metter before the season started, he said he really liked the attitude of the guys, and he thought that they had a strong summer. And I think you're seeing that they're playing much more competitive early in the season than they were last year.
Well, you went to Arkansas last week, and I guess it's my turn to hop the border, except this time I'm going east to Louisiana. It's the annual Battle on the Border Showcase. East Texas has 3 teams competing at the event this weekend, and it all starts late Friday night. It's the nightcap. Lufkin and West Monroe. I'm looking forward to this game, obviously for Lufkin, just to see how they respond after last week's emotional come from behind win. And, sometimes you see a team that expends so much energy that they're kind of flat the next week. So we'll see. But I'll tell you what, if it may have been a coming out party for quarterback Cordell Rogers. He had a huge second half. Dalen Phillips finally showed up after not having a catch in the game against Longview. He had 10 receptions for over 200 yards in that game. Lufkin really broke out of its shell offensively, especially in the second half against Lee, and it'll be interesting to see how they carry that over against West Monroe. And West Monroe, if a lot of people may be familiar with them, they are one of the elite state powers in Louisiana. They've won 8 state championships since 1993. And they're off to a 1-0 start. Their season opener was last week. They defeated Wassman, which is also in Monroe, 42-0. And West Monroe's defense really did a number. Obviously, they shut them out, but Wassman has a couple of Division I commits on offense. I believe one that's going to LSU and another one that's going to La Tech. And West Monroe's defense really did a number on those two and earned a shutout in Week 1. So this will definitely be a test for Lufkin's offense to see how they can match up against a really physical and very talented, very loaded defense of West Monroe. It ought to be a lot of fun. It's scheduled to kick off at 8:30, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. That's probably looking at more like 9:15 or 9:30 because there is a game before it at 6 o'clock. I believe it's River Ridge and Shades Valley.
Yeah, and they're literally banking on that game to play out in an hour and 45 minutes,
which isn't going to happen because if I remember right, last year the teams got 45 minutes in between, at least 40, and it was between 40 and 45 minutes in between games. So you figure the normal 2 hour and 45, 3 hour game, that game's ending at about 8:45 or 9, which means Lufkin may not start till 9:30 or 9:45. So it's going to be a long night for me in Shreveport. And we've got another game involving an East Texas team the very next day, the very next morning over at Independence Stadium in Shreveport. It's Gladewater against Bossier City Parkway. Gladewater, interestingly enough, lost last week to Pittsburgh, kind of an upset. And it'll be interesting to see how they respond. And of course, Bossier City Parkway, you saw them last year against Marshall. They're pretty good, aren't they?
Yeah, they're bigger than Gladewater, and that's going to be a problem in this game. But Gladewater has some advantages. Obviously, their running game is a strength. Their defensive front is a strength. The problem for them is that Parkway is gonna pass and has a little bit more depth in that area. So that's the challenge of this game, defending the pass against Parkway.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how Gladewater responds because, I don't think many people expected what happened to them last week. I mean, they go up to Pittsburgh, a team they beat 77-14 a season ago. They go up there to Pittsburgh against a first-year coach, and it's all new systems on offense and defense for Pittsburgh. And yet, Gladewater loses. It's an upset. They were ranked in the top 10 at the time, and they've since dropped out of the AP poll. And 49-36, I believe, was the final score. Gladewater still had a great performance offensively. Justice Centers had a big night on the ground. Marcelo Jackson had a big night on the ground as well. So they're still able to move the ball. It's just kind of surprising that the defense, let them down a little bit last week, and it'll be interesting to see. If they'll be able to bounce back and have a much better performance against Parkway on Saturday. And then the final game Saturday night at Shreveport is Longview against Shreveport Bird, and that's scheduled for 8 o'clock. But I'm not so sure we're going to get an 8 o'clock kickoff. You'll be there, right?
Yeah, I doubt it. Four games with a lot of passing teams. So I'm looking at 9:30, maybe even 10 o'clock, just like last season. And yeah, I'm going to come tag you out there.
It'll be much appreciated.
I'm excited about this one. Seeing Longview last week and all the progress they've made this season, especially on defense. You've got a team that looks like it's coming into its own with its front, and that's going to be big against Shreveport CE Bird. Bird runs a Georgia Tech triple option style attack, so there are a lot of places to put the ball, and it's pretty straightforward what they're trying to accomplish. But
so you're saying Bird's a little bit different from JT on offense?
Yeah, they're a lot different, and I think they won their game 53-14 against Barb from Lake Charles this past week. In talking to King after the John Tyler game, he said, they scored 53, but they could have put up 153 if they wanted to. Defending an option team is not a lot of fun because you have to play assignments, and sometimes you have to sacrifice yardage to make sure that the quarterback isn't able to pitch to his man. So I think that remaining disciplined and remaining patient and
making tackles.
Yeah, making tackles and expecting to catch a break later on in the drive is route to go. Very impressed with Longview's running game, and I think this is going to be a fast game between the two sides. Tylen Miller has had a fantastic senior season so far, and there are a couple of runners behind him that showed what they could do against a John Tyler team with a clear strength also in its defensive front with guys like Braylon Jones and Pierre Leonard and some good linebackers.
Yeah, but it should be a whole lot of fun. Can't wait for this week. It's going to be a long weekend, busy weekend for East Texas. There are a lot of districts that start after this, so we may have some teams off next week. But this is the final full slate of high school football in East Texas for a couple of weeks until everybody's in district in about 3 or 4 weeks. So that's what we have to look forward to this week. We want to touch on our players of the week from last week. Congratulations to our Offensive Player of the Week, Lufkin junior quarterback Cordell Rogers. We mentioned him briefly just a moment ago in that comeback against Lee. He finished the night with 444 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he added 119 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground in Lufkin's 52-49 overtime win over Lee. He kind of overshadowed what I thought was going to be the shoe-in for the Offensive Player of the Week through about a half of that game, and that was Zach Hall from Lee. Zach Hall ended up passing for 330 and running for 230. He had a monster game. It was limited a little bit in the second half, but those first half numbers he put up were ridiculous. But Cordell Rogers ends up capturing the award, and an award well-deserved.
Yeah, Cordell, it's been fun to watch him develop this season as well. He's a guy that I think has a really high ceiling on the high school game, and really stepped up in his only a second game as the Lufkin starter.
And our defensive player of the week is Brewster Griffith from Carthage. Tell us a little bit about Brewster.
Yeah, had a really tough time trying to pick a defensive player of the week, but circumstances were that Lyndale's driving down the field against Carthage at the very end of the game, and Montana Metter, the Lyndale quarterback, throws a dead-on pass, and Brewster jumps the route and pulls it down to give Carthage a 24-20 win over Lyndale, and that was big. And I look at this award as a team award for Carthage, a really good defensive performance all around. After they blew a 17-7 lead and it became a 17-14 game, held Lyndale to field goals after that in the second half. So really stepped up when they had to against a team that might be going places.
So congratulations to our ETSN and Dairy Queen Offensive and Defensive Players of the Week, Cordell Rogers of Lufkin and Brewster Griffith of Carthage. Well, we're out of time for this week. If you have any questions or comments for us, please hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Clint Buckley, and Mike.
I'm Mike _ETSN.
Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.